When a country's economy is only growing as a result of spending into non-productive assets, it is not sustainable and it is not going to end well. And this is exactly what happened with Canada. If you look at the GDP numbers on the paper, it looks pretty attractive. Like this chart, it looks like the Canada's GDP is growing, and for the last 2 decades we have been producing a lot of goods and services. But if you look at the under the hood, we realize that GDP numbers is quite misleading because it is skewed by a lot of immigration. So in Canada, we have imported 1.2 million people last year alone, 1.2 million. And these immigrants, when they're coming into this country, they're bringing their wealth with them, which means they're going to come and spend into this economy. And much of that spending is going into services sector, which means consumable products, buying real estate, renting or purchasing, which actually skew the overall GDP number. So GDP is calculated based upon the spending. It doesn't really differentiate whether the spending is going in terms of productive or non-productive assets. So when we look at the under the hood GDP, which is GDP per capita, we realize Canada's GDP is stagnant for the last 2 decades. 2 decades. Okay, and if we compare the population growth of Canada versus its G7 peers, Canada's population growth is off the chart, literally off the chart. So if you remove this population factor, this whole GDP is gonna crash down significantly. So that means the numbers that we see on the paper from Stats Canada or from Trudeau's government, it's basically very misleading. So Canada's economy is not growing, guys. It is looking like it's growing, but under the hood, when we look into by doing just a little bit of research, which I did over the weekend, it's not growing, it's flat. And what is the reason behind the flat real GDP, which is GDP per capita? The short answer is we are service-based industry. We are not producing enough. The productivity for Canadian as a nation is flat for the last 2 decades. So that means if we are only measuring GDP based upon the consumer spending, which is going towards non-productive asset class like residential real estate, we're not producing goods and services, which is going to produce jobs and grow the overall economy. And one of the reasons why Canada's real GDP, which is GDP per capita, is so flat is because we spent the lowest amount of money on research and development. So according to TD Economist, Canada's GDP towards R&D is 1.7%. So we spend 1.7% of our GDP towards research and development, which is half of what US spent on their R&D, which is lower than what the G7 countries spend on their R&D. So if you're not spending into research and development, you're not creating new jobs, new products, new innovation, all you're doing is pumping real estate, which is non-productive asset class, which is not producing any goods and services or creating jobs in the economy. But on the paper, it looks like the GDP is growing, which is kind of misleading. So is there any light at the end of the tunnel? I don't think so. According to TD Economist, look at this chart. We only have forecast up until 2025, and it's not looking good. It's not growing, and the reason is because the country that we are being run by is people who are stupid or idiot or maybe ignorant completely. And until we have the direction set at the top, we're not looking towards growing this economy in a productive terms. Mind you, all of this economy is built upon the residential real estate, and that sector is under turmoil right now as Bank of Canada is aggressively raising rates, which has been most aggressive monetary policy in the last 20 years. This is going to bring this house of cards crashing down very hard. And if that investment, which we have seen going into residential real estate market, which was responsible for the GDP numbers, if that investment is going to be abolished, think about that, where this GDP number will look in the next 2 or 3 quarters. This is where we will announce that we are officially going into recession, because we cannot display the GDP number as attractive as we have been doing it for the last few years. Anyway, this is just my thought. Let me know what you think. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Thank you.